Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Hugh Hewitt, thank you for joining me on this Monday, May 4th, 2020, in the year of the plague. 68,286 Americans have died, according to one number. The CDC says 65,735 from the virus. 1,122,000 cases in the United States. That's quite a lot. Worldwide, we have 3.51 million cases outside of China. We know nothing of what's going inside of China. They have been revealed over the weekend to really have been a bad actor in this, not only in their negligence in allowing to escape, but in their apparent willingness to see it spread. That goes from negligence to willfulness and raises the stakes dramatically. This next election is going to be about whether or not you are serious about China, because the Democrats are not. And they are the number one adversary of the United States and will be for the forthcoming future. We know that we know a few things now, and the CDC's website's getting better and better and better every week. We know that for every 100,000 cases of COVID, right? So 100,000 people get it, 40 people end up in the hospital. Now, that's dramatically higher for people who are 65 years and older. For every 100,000 cases of people over 65 who get it, 131 people end up in the hospital. If you're over 50, 63% of you end up in the hospital. And the reason for that is the older you are, the likely you are to get hypertension or to be obese. And the comorbidity of hypertension, high blood pressure, and obesity is extraordinary. 57% of people with COVID who die have hypertension. Half of the people who die with COVID are obese. So lose the weight, take your blood pressure medication, get some exercise. Number one. Children being hospitalized is next to nothing. There may be a handful of cases across the United States, but it's just, thank God, it is not attacking children. It is far worse than the flu. I have begun to think about it like a gunshot. Now, gunshot fatalities are only 30 to 35,000 a year, only being in quotes. It's like car accidents. You don't want to be in a car accident. You don't want to be shot by a gun, and you don't want to have COVID. A lot of people survive most car accidents and aren't even injured. Most gunshots, though, inflict a lot of pain, and most COVID cases inflict a lot of pain, but they don't normally kill you. And you can work with these analogies and tell me what you think. But I am curious again to hear from doctors, because the anecdotal evidence of the disease is really alarming. I read anecdotes all weekend long from ER physicians, nurses, the children of doctors, and they tell horrific stories of people in the ICU, because it's a savage disease when it gets a hold of you. But how many people does it get a hold of? And I was beginning to think we're going to have to dial up the dimmer much quicker. But then I read these anecdotes and I think, I just don't know. I don't know. Nobody knows. President was on Fox doing a town hall last night, and he wanted to tell people where we are going. I like this quote, number 11.
But no, we have to get our life back. We have to get our country back. We have to get the world back. We want to have, if we have a stadium in Alabama that holds 110,000 people against LSU, I went there. We want to have 110,000. We don't want to have 25,000 people or 40,000 people, and that'll happen. Maybe it's going to be a vaccine, or maybe it's going to be that this virus will pass. It will go. Will it come back? It might. It could. Some people say yes, but it will pass.
It will pass. So that is the number one thing to fix on. This may be here for another year and a half at the outside before we figure it out. But to me, what is most important, and I would welcome doctors, 1-800-520-1234, 1-800-520-1234. I would love to hear what doctors are seeing. The doctors that I talked to on Friday aren't seeing anything because they're not working much. And the president said last night, we've got to get elective surgeries back. The thing that went wild last night was his comment about Lincoln. Of course, it's being distorted. Absolutely being distorted. And I'll play it for you, then I'll tell you what happened. Cut number 8. This is the president last night at the Lincoln Memorial Town Hall.
I am greeted with a hostile press, the likes of which no president has ever seen. The closest would be that gentleman right up there. They always said Lincoln, nobody got treated worse than Lincoln. I believe I am treated worse. You're there,
Stop right
you
there.
see the...
Then, of course, the left-wing nutters on Twitter, and you really have to be a nutter to take this out of context. He wasn't talking about the assassination. He was talking about Lincoln's press. And objectively, the amount and volume and number of media. Okay, so I saw a lot of smart, I'll read a Wikipedia quote about Lincoln press. They haven't studied Lincoln. Lincoln had terrible press. The South hated him because he was freeing African Americans. He was going to break up the Union once they seceded. He was going to force them back. Once they broke up the Union, he was forcing them back. So he was hated. And his press was bad, but it wasn't as bad as Trump's, and it wasn't as bad as Nixon's because it wasn't as big, and it wasn't as rapid, and it wasn't as omnipresent. But they tried. I mean, the left wing is nuts in this country. They tried to say that Trump said he was treated worse than Lincoln. Ha, 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 Lincoln was assassinated. You know how that ended? Just stupid. Just stupid in the middle of a national crisis that was caused by China. All right? The most important thing the president said last night is that he didn't quite say it. There's a case to be made, he began to say. And Dwayne, I got to have you look for that for me so I don't spend time going through all these. There's a case to be made that China knew what it had. And the president implied, and they let it get out just to make sure they weren't at a competitive disadvantage. Wow. Wow. Now, I want to tell you two things. I have a brand new column up on the award. It happened Friday after the show of the new American Navy frigate. It's going to Wisconsin, and it's great. They ordered 10 of them. My new column is the president ought to quintuple the order and triple the shipyard. Just like we did in World War II times 10. In World War II, they would order, 200 ships, 250 ships at a blow. Here, let's order 50, Mr. President. Let's get going. That's got, 600 comments already. It went up late last night, and I guess they must all be applauding. But what I really want to tell you about is that some of you had asked me, what about Angel Tree? What about the summer camps? We send the child of a man or a woman in jail to summer camp every year. Are you doing it this year? Look, I know that many of you love to support these kids by sending them to camp, but I want you to listen. We have a major challenge on our hands. There aren't going to be camps this year, but all those kids are still at home. They often do not have what you've got, Netflix or Amazon Prime or places to walk. They got a mom or a dad in prison. They're in rough neighborhoods. There are gangs and drugs and other dangers. I would like to enlist every one of you to help these precious kids by sending them a Angel Tree care package. This is different. We can't go to camp this summer. We'll take them to camp next summer. But we want to say we know you're there. Prison Fellowship's Jim Forbes says each prisoner's child has been selected based on needs.
Kids all over the country, all 50 states, who their parent, while in prison, said, I really want to help the relationship with my son or daughter, and I'd like to give them a gift. So the kid receives the gift, and it doesn't say from Prison Fellowship. It says from mom or dad.
Oh, we need $200 per giver. $200 will bless an at-risk boy or girl with a very special Angel Tree care package. $150 in grocery gift cards. Their choice of sports equipment, basketball, soccer ball, an age-appropriate Bible, like Zondervan's Pathlight Camper's Bible, some Bible study aids, a note of encouragement. Will you please stand with us again this year? We can't send them to camp, but we can't send them a package from their mom or dad. Cost $200. Will you help provide that special summer care package from our friends at Prison Fellowship's Angel Tree? You can go to HughHewitt.com. It's at the very top. You've been asking me, when are we going to start the campaign? Well, today. Angel Tree care packages. The banner is at the top of HughHewitt.com. We do it every summer. This year, we're sending them a special gift from their mom or their dad. Please help us do that. The banner is at the top of HughHewitt.com. I am glad to be back at work, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Thank you for listening. I'm so glad. Weekends are long for the fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I. We can't see our kids, can't see our very young grandchildren, and cannot do the normal thing. But we have blessing above blessing because nobody's sick. All right. I did lose my oldest friend over the weekend, not to COVID. My oldest friend, that means I've known him since I was 2. We went to elementary school and high school together. And Johnny Phillips of St. Petersburg Beach, Florida, you will be missed. Johnny was one of those guys. I was with him during the 2012 convention that nominated Mitt Romney. The California delegation was at St. Pete's Beach, and I stayed with him right there on the beach. Great place. At the Beachcomber bar, Johnny would come over and sit with us, my buddy, Fairway Phil Mokris, and I. 3 high school buddies, 3 elementary school buddies, sitting around talking about the old days almost every night. And Johnny was fine 8 years ago, and life was good. His mom and dad were there, Doc and Margie, and everything was good. And then, without telling us, a year and a half ago, he got sick, and without telling us, he died. So the first thing I heard yesterday was that my oldest friend in the world died. It was Saturday, excuse me. And so it was kind of a shock, but not from COVID. Lots of people are dealing with that. You know, I've got my family is healthy. If you're healthy, you got everything. You'll get your job back. We'll reopen America. But for those who are not healthy, it's tough. It's a rough deal. What about the economy? The president talked about it last night. This is what he said, cut number 3.
If you're scared, you're going to stay back a little bit and you're going to watch it. And I think anyone over 60, because we have a pretty good roadmap right now. Anybody over 60, you could say 65, but let's make it 60. We have to protect those people and we have to watch it, and maybe they stay back longer. But no, I think you can really have it both ways. I think a lot of people want to go back. They just want to go back. You see it every day. You see demonstrations all over the country, and those are meaningful demonstrations. Oh, it's big stuff. But you also have some people that are very scared. Probably everybody's scared when you get right down to it. It's a terrible thing that happened to our country.
It's like a gunshot, right? You do not want to get shot, and you do not want to get COVID, especially if you're over 65, especially if you're obese and have hypertension. But what about that economy? Cut number 5 is where President Trump talks about the economy.
I think we're going to have an incredible following year. We're going to go into a transition in the third quarter, and we're going to see things happening that look good. I really believe that. I have a good feel for this stuff. I've done it for a long time. We built the greatest economy in the world. The greatest economy, frankly, Brett, and you can correct me if you'd like, but you can't because it's fact. The greatest economy that the world has ever seen. And then one day they said, sir, we're going to have to close it. I said, what are you talking about closing it? Nobody ever heard that. We're going to have to close it. And we did the right thing. I think we saved millions of lives, but now we have to get it back open. And we have to get it back open safely, but as quickly as possible.
So what's the economy telling us? Overnight, international markets tanked because of the looming confrontation between China and the United States, which is not going to be a 1 day, 1 week, 1 month, 1 year, 1 decade confrontation. The mask is off. And we'll find that clip and play it for Mike Allen after the break where he says the case can be made. But Japan, this is brought to you by Birch Gold. And in times of trouble, gold goes up. Gold is at $1,718 this morning, $1,718 an ounce. And you ought to diversify. You ought to have gold in your safety deposit box, some gold in your retirement account. You can get all the information on how to do that by texting my name, Hugh, H-U-G-H, to 474747. Banks are tightening lending requirements for home purchases. What happens if construction fails? You know, if the economy goes in the dumper because of a bad second wave, gold will go even higher, or of a confrontation with China, or if this oil glut, which is now clearing up, gold will go high. It's high right now, 1719. I originally told you to get in at 1400. But overseas, overnight, Japan was down almost 3%, Hong Kong down 4% as they realize a trade war is coming. Not so bad in England this morning, but Germany's down 3.33%. Gold is always good in a crisis, and we're heading into rough waters between us and China. Thank goodness we got a new frigate Text my name, Hugh, to 474747 or go to hughgold.com. Come right back. Mike Allen, Mondays with Mike, right here on The Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt. You know what Looking Glasses Brandy was the soundtrack for, of course, don't you? Generalissimo, are you awake in there? Ben, can you bring up Generalissimo's
Yeah, I'm here.
camera? You're here. Do you know what this was the soundtrack for?
Guardians of the Galaxy.
Guardians of the Galaxy. And you know who was in the shot?
This particular shot? No.
Yep. Kurt Russell driving his convertible.
Okay, yeah.
I may have to watch the Guardians of the Galaxy movies today. I know you were on your scooter all weekend. I actually Vikings binged. I did my. Okay, you take that down. Looking Glass. I did my 51-mile week last week, which included a 10-mile trundle on Saturday and a 9-mile and a 1-miler on Sunday to get to 51. I haven't done 51 miles in forever. I'll tell you about Relief Factor afterwards. But
Did you at least stay on the side of the bike path where you belong?
I do not ever run against traffic on a bike path. That's nuts. On the street, I will sometimes run against traffic, but not on a bike path because you'll get killed. And the bike paths on the streets that I use, pretty empty, socially distanced. I wear my scarf. I look like I look like the scarecrow of Romney Marsh because I got the perfect scarf that ties the right way. But I haven't done 51 miles in years, and I'll tell you about that with Relief Factor. But I also will tell you that when I wasn't, I'm trying to get my exercise in because this virus doesn't like people my age. It really doesn't like people a year or two older. Doesn't really hates people who are 70. And so you got to keep your lungs in great shape. You got to keep your weight down. You got to keep your blood pressure down. I'm in great shape except for, the back hurts like cement blocks when I'm done. But that's the way you just deal with it. You got to get the miles in. So the lethargic part of the weekend was spent watching the final season of The Last Kingdom, Uhtred of Bebenberg. And if you haven't watched Uhtred, you realize it's got 40 episodes and it's the same episode. All right? It is actually the same 40 hours. So when you watch a lot of it back to back to back to back, you realize this and you begin to look at the aesthetic quality, the production values of the show, other than anything else. But it's just back to back to back to back. It's the same thing, but we watch. That is also what President Trump says. The same things, the same key messages again, again, and again, and again. Why? Because that's how you get through. And one of the key messages is this was done to us, to the world, by the People's Republic of China. Have you found that yet, Dwayne? That cut that I'm looking for?
I'm still looking for it.
Still looking for it. Let's play the long cut on China. It might be in this cut number 9. I think it might be in cut number 9. I'll tell you to stop if I hear it. Go ahead, Ben.
For my firm, the current tariffs add up to almost $60,000 in monthly additional costs for my operations. Lifting these tariffs would help us speed the recovery for many of us by allowing those funds to be used to hire workers, invest in equipment, and recoup some of the cash we've spent to weather the current economic situation. Would you consider permanently or even temporarily reducing or eliminating those tariffs?
So, Phil, we're looking at different things, but you have to remember, I've taken those tariffs and given a lot of them to the farmers, and farmers that would have been really forced out of business by China when they were targeted, because China never had to target us, because China was ripping our country off. We were losing $500 billion a year to China for years, and $300 billion, $200 billion, $544 billion. $544 billion a few years ago. And what I'm doing is, and what I've done is taken a lot of money out of China, and I've given it back to Phil and other people, because I've given it back to not all of it, because we had so much money came in from China, but we gave, as I said, $12 billion 2 years ago, $16 billion, and this year we have $19 billion that we're distributing to the farmers. Nobody's ever done that. No president's ever done that.
But Phil is obviously bringing in supplies from China that he's paying tariffs on. Would you encourage him to try to find other countries to buy those things from?
He is, but you know what they're also getting? They're getting big payments. The farmers are getting big payments. And by the way, they are the most incredible people. They don't even want the payments. You know what they say to me? Something that almost no other group, and I can say practically no other group, they want a level playing field. We had a meeting with them, with Mike, and they came in and I said, we're going to give you this. They said, sir, honestly, we don't want anything. We just want a level playing field. Because for 18 years, really, it's longer than that, they've been taken advantage of not only by China, by everybody, including Canada, including many, many countries that you wouldn't even think. So the farmers now, with the new USMCA and all of the other things, and as far as Phil, I understand it, but we're giving billions and billions of that money to the farmers and have a lot of money that goes back into the Treasury. And Steve is the proud recipient from the standpoint of the Treasury.
But are you considering new tariffs on China as sort of a punishment for their handling of the virus?
Well, it's the ultimate punishment. I will tell you that. I don't.
You had experts look at.
I don't like to tell you what because we're all playing a very complicated game of chess or poker. Name whatever you want to name, but it's not checkers. That I can tell you. We have a very complicated game going. Our country was being ripped off by every nation in the world, and now we have made unbelievable strides. Unfortunately, then we get hit by this whole situation. But we have done so well. We have taken in so much money. Going before the virus, China had the worst year they had in 67 years. That's the reason. And I'm not happy about that, but what it does is it says they were taking us for a ride.
Right, but to Phil's point is that Americans
has ever done at any time.
He's saying Americans feel it. Experts said just your mention of that helped drive the markets down Thursday and Friday. But I'm just wondering if you're really seriously thinking about it.
Tariffs at a minimum are the greatest negotiating tool that we have ever devised that were never used for negotiation. President Xi only made the deal with us. They're going to buy $250 billion. Now, we're going to have to see what's going on because of what happened. This was done, months before the virus. But we're going to buy $250 billion worth of our product. $250 billion. They didn't buy 2 cents. They didn't want to buy from us. They took advantage of our country. Now they have to buy. And if they don't buy, we'll terminate the deal. Very simple. But by using the tariffs, that's the only reason. The one thing that he said, we must get rid of tariffs. I said, we're not going to get rid of tariffs. You got to treat our country with respect. You've been ripping off our country for many years. The World Trade Organization has ripped off this country. That's when China became an economic power. And by the way, you have World Trade and you have World Health. The World Health Organization has been a disaster. Everything they said was wrong, and they're China-centric. All they do is they agree with China, whatever China wants to do. So our country, perhaps foolishly in retrospect, has been paying $450 million a year to the World Health Organization. And China has been paying $38 million a year. But they were more political than all of our leaders previous. So we'll see what I do with that. I'm going to have to make a decision on that. But we're not happy because what they did, what World Health did, they missed every single call.
That wasn't it. That wasn't it. So it's not number 9. I got to find that because it is the key to what he said. He didn't really say it, but Bill Gertz, probably America's best national security reporter, heard exactly what I heard. He said a case can be made. And he began to talk about that they let it get out, that they didn't intend for it to get out, but once it got out, a case can be made that they let it spread. He's talking about how flights out of Wuhan to the world were allowed, but flights out of Wuhan to other places like Beijing. So if you have a word search tool, what, you got it? You got it? You found? Oh, Mike Allen, you decided to join us this morning, Mike. How are you?
I'm kind of a late sleeper, Hugh. I think that that I tend to doze off, wake up at brunch time. So anyway, thanks for having me.
Give us the top story in Axios AM because we got like 3 minutes, buddy.
Yeah, two amazing things in Axios AM. One, the college gamble. So many colleges last week decided we have to have students back on our campuses in the fall. And they know that they may not have the tests they need, but colleges around the country said, come back this fall. And they're starting to show their cards about how they're going to try to do that. They're going to test you when you come in. They're going to try to, some of them will just have freshmen and try to spread them out through the whole dorms. Some of them will still do their lecture classes online. Of course, sports with no spectators. But as Erica Pandy, who wrote this story, points out, telling students not to have parties or hang out with their friends is easier said than done. And of course, Hugh, I know you agree with this, that getting together, learning from others, that's a huge part of the on-campus experience. And that's now at risk, even if they do bring people back.
Mike, I hope you send your education reporter to look at this. A lot of faculty. I'm a tenured member of the Chapman University Law School, and I have been for 25 years. I'm 64. I fully expect, I won't take it, but I fully expect that they will offer everyone over 60 an early out because they realize the most vulnerable members of their faculty are those who are over 65. And a lot of faculty members just keep teaching because they love to teach. You'll find a lot of 70-year-old faculty members, a lot of 75-year-old faculty members. I think they're going to have to try and lure them away from campus because if I look at the CDC numbers, this is like a gunshot wound, right? Nobody goes looking for a gunshot wound. There are about 100,000 of those a year. 30,000 of them are fatal. Mark it down here first, Mike. Everyone's going to use this analogy eventually. But this seems to be a gunshot wound that mostly mows down people who are 65 years and older. So did your reporter say anything about buying out and getting retirements from the older faculty members who are most vulnerable on college campuses?
I haven't seen that, but that makes total sense. And it's of a piece with this idea that they're trying everything to pull this off. They recognize that there's financial, cultural calamity if they can't find a way to bring the students back. Parents and students, Hugh, I know you're having the same conversations that I am, are finding that Zooming just is not the same. And by the way, nephew Ben from Oregon is, I think, going to be a Chapman freshman playing club lacrosse.
Oh, bravo, a Panther. We're very happy about that. I talked to Daniele Strupa.
I heard your club of lacrosse is awesome.
It is.
And he's great. So.
They are. I talked to Daniele Strupa, who's the president of Chapman. We're definitely coming back. Now, I'm taking a year off because of the Nixon Library again, but I expect this higher education. One of the things that has to happen, you got to get the older faculty members off. Because Mike, if you looked at these CDC numbers, obesity and hypertension plus age equals death. That's it. That's the equation.
Hugh, I have one more sentence for you.
Yeah.
A story that I know is in your wheelhouse, a scoop by Jonathan Swan, a person in the administration on the outs with the president. It won't surprise you. FBI Director Christopher Wray. Swan reports that the president complains he just doesn't feel like he's the guy. As you know how important that is to the president. He doesn't feel like he is going to shake up the agency the way that he feels like it should have been done after the Michael Flynn revelations. But he's probably staying. He's deferring to Attorney General Barr. And Hugh, two very practical reasons Christopher Wray will probably keep his job. One, people say, do you really want to kick over the hornet's nest 6 months out yesterday from the election by firing another FBI director? And Hugh, the second one, and this is in your wheelhouse, they don't have a logical replacement. So Christopher Wray keeps his job.
I think you're right. I think Bill Barr wouldn't want him to go, especially with the Durham investigation proceeding at pace. Mike Allen of Axios AM. Thank you, Mike. Time to show you my relieffactor.com and take it. You know why I take it? 51 miles last week, walking or trundling. I no longer say running because I never get below 10-minute miles anymore. Never. Maybe someday. I carry in Curcumin, resveratrol, omega, and lukewarm coffee. Why do I do these miles? Because this disease comes for your lungs, and if you're out there walking and running, you'll put up a better fight. So take relieffactor.com, support the temporary relief of the minor aches and pains that come with exercise, and then start to exercise. Please stay alive. I'll be right back, America. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. That's Jimmy Rogers and the Carter family at what are known as the Bristol Sessions, the big bang of modern country music in the birthplace of country music, Bristol, Tennessee, and Bristol, Virginia, which is right across State Street. Salena Zito, who you can follow on Twitter at Salena Zito, columnist for the Washington Examiner, the New York Post, the Wall Street Journal, went down to Bristol, Virginia, and Tennessee, and she has produced one of the best columns I have read this year. Good morning, Salena. For the Yinzer Report, we're talking about Tennessee and Virginia. Everything's out of kilter.
Good morning I'm back in Pittsburgh now, but I was in Bristol, Virginia / Tennessee, and that music was wonderful that you just played.
Well, we're on Super Talk 92.9 in the Tri-Cities, so we're on in Bristol right now as people go about either opening or not opening. I just want you to take the floor and tell people what you saw down in Bristol, Virginia, Tennessee. You're going to have to describe the city for them so they understand how stark this is. I can't believe you're the first who did this. This is a CBS Evening News, an NBC Evening News, an ABC Evening News special. They ought to be down there.
So Bristol, Tennessee, Virginia is right in the corner of East Tennessee, Western Virginia, right in the heart of Appalachia. And, there's a lot of border towns in this country, but this is one of the really most unique ones because it's essentially one city that is divided by, two yellow lines. And on one side of the street is Tennessee, on the other side of the street is Bristol. They share a couple. Is Virginia. They share a couple of things: a library, water system, but they also share a vibrant business district. It's called State Street, ironically. And I was there on Saturday, sitting at Bob's at the burger joint on the Virginia side, having the most amazing bacon cheeseburger ever, standing up because you can't sit down. And, we're looking across the street and Tennessee side is open. State Line Bar and Grill was open. People were going in. They were sitting outside. They were sitting inside. But on the Virginia side, you couldn't do that because on the Virginia side, Ralph Northam has treated regions across his entire state of Virginia as though it were one monolithic state, as opposed to, very vibrant and different places. I mean, Bristol, Virginia could not be more different than Northern Virginia. But yet it is, it is being treated the same way. And these businesses on the Virginia side of Bristol were closed. It was dead. There were two places open, and they were only doing curbside pickup at the burger place.
You captured the frustration of the people on the Virginia side, and what your column did, and I've tweeted it out. It's again, just follow Salena Zito on Twitter if you want to see it. Is it captures the apparent illogic of allowing some places to be open, other places closed, when neither place has a high incidence of the disease. That's the bottom line. I mean, the disease is in some places. I have likened it to a gunshot wound. You don't want to get COVID. It can be, like 100,000 gunshot wounds in the United States every year. The 100,000 fatalities, 35,000 people die. But you don't want COVID, especially if you're older, obese, and have hypertension. But where it isn't, it doesn't make sense to have slowed down this way.
Yeah, it absolutely doesn't. And I mean, at the diner, he's telling me, there are days where I've done $90 in sales in one day. And
they can't say is he going to be able to survive?
He's an incredibly Joe Deal. He's an incredibly optimistic man. Him and his wife are both work there. That kind of makes it hard when you're both at the same place. You're both sort of suffering the same consequences. But he's an incredibly optimistic person, and he thinks that they will survive.
And so we got a minute left, Salena Zito. On the Tennessee side of the street, Do they feel any fear at all, or are they just shaking their heads in wonder at the Virginia side of the street?
They feel really bad for their counterparts on the Virginia side. You know, these are people that enjoy and love and thrive off a healthy competition. You know, they jab each other and they have little competing events, but to be honest, they don't want to see the other side of the street die. This is really tough on everybody.
To all my listeners on Super Talk 92.9 in the Tri-Cities area, we're rooting for you all. We hope Governor Northam does begin to figure out that the whole state doesn't have to be closed, even if Northern Virginia near D.C. does. And maybe Norfolk and Virginia Beach. But, I mean, Bristol, come on, Governor, wake up. It's a big state, a lot of different places around here. Salena Zito on Twitter and the Washington Examiner, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Post, a great writer, a great reporter, a great weekly guest on the Hugh Hewitt Show. I'll be right back, America. Stay tuned. Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. It's Hugh Hewitt on May 4th, the year of the plague 2020. The CDC says 65,000 Americans, 735 have died. Others say 68,000. I'll go with the CDC's numbers. But we do have 1,122,000 with the virus. And I want you to know that these grim numbers of 65,000 dead, 66,000 dead, they're going to go up to 100,000, the president said last night. It's all because of China, because of the Communist Chinese Party, Chinese Communist Party, CCP. Now, I have a new Washington Post column that talks about how we have to get serious at sea, on the sea, over the sea, under the sea, and cyber about the CCP, and we have to do it right away. The award of the new frigate last week is a first step. The president should quintuple the order and triple the yards. That's what my column's about. Send it everywhere. But last night he said the most interesting thing of a very interesting show at the Lincoln Memorial with Brett Baer and Martha McCallum is this part, cut number 17.
What they really treated the world badly on, they stopped people going into China, but they didn't stop people going into the USA and all over the world. So you could fly out of Wuhan, where the primary problem was, all of the problem, essentially, also where the lab is. But you could fly out of Wuhan and you could go to different parts of the world, but you couldn't go to Beijing and you couldn't go to any place in China. So what's that all about? In other words, they knew they had a problem. I think they were embarrassed by the problem, very embarrassed. And, the case could be made. They said, hey, look, this is going to have a huge impact on China. And we might as well let the rest of the world, because the last people they want, we've had a great year against China prior to the virus coming.
Stop right there. He didn't quite say it. The case can be made that China let the virus out intentionally because they were crippled by it. And therefore they decided to cripple the world. That's the implication. That is damning. And I got to tell you, Mike Pompeo was on this week with Martha Raddatz yesterday, cut number 15 for the Secretary of State.
The Chinese Communist Party had the opportunity to prevent all of the calamity that has befallen the world. And here we find ourselves today. You and I were talking about we haven't seen each other physically for a long time. That's true of people all across the world. This is an enormous crisis created by the fact that the Chinese Communist Party reverted to form, reverted to the kinds of disinformation, the kinds of concealment that authoritarian regimes do. Had those scientists been operating in America, they would have put this out, there would have been an exchange of ideas, and we would have quickly identified the kinds of things that needed to be done in response. Instead, China behaved like authoritarian regimes do, attempted to conceal and hide and confuse. It employed the World Health Organization as a tool to do the same. These are the kind of things that have now presented this enormous crisis, an enormous loss of life, and tremendous economic cost all across the globe. The Australians agree with that. You hear the Europeans beginning to say the same thing. I think the whole world is united, understanding that China brought this virus to the world.
1-800-520-1234. I only want to talk to doctors about what doctors are seeing. 1-800-520-1234. Ben will take your calls. Only doctors, please, and I'll test you to make sure you're a doctor. I want to know what you're seeing in the ERs. I also want to go back and play the second part of what Secretary Pompeo said, cut number 16.
We've done our best to try and answer all of those questions. We tried to get a team in there. The World Health Organization tried to get a team in there, and they have failed. No one's been allowed to go to this lab or any of the other laboratories. There are many labs inside of China, Martha. This risk remains. This is an ongoing challenge. We still need to get in there. We still don't have the virus samples we need. This is an ongoing threat, an ongoing pandemic, and the Chinese Communist Party continues to block access to the Western world, the world's best scientists, to figure out exactly what happened. So I can't answer your question about that, because the Chinese Communist Party has refused to cooperate with World Health experts.
All right, so this is, and I'm going to go back and play President Trump again, because you just have to hear this. Bill Gertz and I immediately sat up, and we heard what he was intimating, though he did not underscore it. He's not going to walk himself into a corner yet. But I know where this screenplay is going. I know where this show ends. I know where this thought concludes. Cut number 17.
What they really treated the world badly on, they stopped people going into China, but they didn't stop people going into the USA and all over the world. So you could fly out of Wuhan, where the primary problem was, all of the problem, essentially, also where the lab is. But you could fly out of Wuhan and you could go to different parts of the world, but you couldn't go to Beijing and you couldn't go to any place in China. So what's that all about? In other words, they knew they had a problem. I think they were embarrassed by the problem, very embarrassed. And, the case could be made. They said, hey, look, this is going to have a huge impact on China, and we might as well let the rest of the world, because the last people they want.
We might as well let the rest of the world, then he stops. What? Suffer the consequences. That's what the president said. A case can be made that the Chinese just said we might as well let the rest of the world get it too, because of the competitive disadvantage we are at right now. Look, this coming election is about China. You may not like Trump, but I'm telling you, Joe Biden is an appeaser. The Democratic Party is appeasement oriented. They appease China. Before them, they appeased Iran. You cannot appease these people. You have to compete. You have to stand up and negotiate. You can smile when you do it. You can get along with President Xi when you do it, but you have to realize they are not playing by the West's rules. The Chinese Communist Party does not value human life. Mao didn't, Deng Xiaoping didn't at Tiananmen Square, and they do not now vis-a-vis the virus. So who's going to lead that? Trump and Pompeo and Esper and Robert C. O'Brien, or Joe Biden? Joe Biden and the Chinese. Honestly, if you think Joe Biden would have done a better job than Trump, you really have not listened to Secretary Gates, who served as Secretary of Defense under both Presidents Bush and Obama, saying Joe Biden hadn't been right about anything in 40 years. He's not right about anything now. Christopher in Ohio. Good morning, Christopher. He's a doctor. What are you seeing, Christopher, and where are you seeing it?
So I'm down in Chillicothe, Ohio, and I guess kind of like a lot of smaller towns. The numbers not quite what we were expecting. So of course the ERs and hospitals are not quite as not very full. The hospitals are having to lay off individuals.
Doc, what kind of a doctor are you, by the way?
So I'm a kidney specialist.
Okay.
So I'm a kidney specialist and also a health commissioner for the area. So
now I've been studying the CDC statistics, and it seems to me that the virus is sort of like a gunshot wound. When you get shot, you're in really bad shape, especially if you've got hypertension and obesity. But most people don't get shot. I'm talking about hospitalization cases. Have you had any virus cases in the hospital where it's really bad?
Yes. We actually have had a few cases in the hospital. One person actually expired. So we've had a few of those.
Was renal failure associated with it?
Yes.
So how do you describe the disease to people who don't understand why it's so lethal when it hits hard?
So actually, I do. I guess kind of similar to what you're saying, and that is that this is a virus that you do not want. While there are quite a few people that are asymptomatic or have light or mild symptoms, kind of like you described, those individuals that I have heard that have had this disease describe pretty significant misery, like I said, and one of the individuals I was on a call with. Their symptoms actually started out with more of the GI symptoms, kind of nausea, diarrhea, and then proceeded into more of the malaise, achy, and shortness of breath. That individual did have to go to the hospital. They were fortunate they didn't have to get intubated, but they said it was a kind of a very long illness path. I think they were about a week and a half. So it's something that you definitely do not want, and it's trying to describe that to people, because I think it is conceptually difficult to envision.
What do you think of my analogy of a gunshot wound? You just don't want a gunshot wound.
I like that, Hugh. Matter of fact, I hope you don't mind. I might borrow this when I'm talking to people, because I'll give you credit. But yeah, you're right. That's exactly what this is. I mean, this is something that you do not want this. Because when you get it, you're really kind of rolling the dice. Like I said, is it a flesh wound, or is it something in more of a central area where you're going to suffer from it.
When you get it, you're really rolling the dice. Okay, I'll trade you because I'm going to use you, Doc. When you get it, you're really rolling the dice. I'm gonna trade you analogy for analogy because I think that is what is the conundrum presented by this Chinese origin virus. It came out of Wuhan. They visited it on the world, and when you get it, you're really rolling the dice. It's like a gunshot wound when you get it bad. I'll be right back, America. Stay tuned.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by No Safe Spaces.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. That's my salute to the fetching Mrs. Hewitt. I think I'd be going crazy right now if not for her and my kids and the crazy little grandkids, too. I just tell you that I don't know. I pray for people who are alone because you're spending, even if you're outdoors an hour or two a day, walking, doing it the right way, you're still spending a lot more time by yourself. Nursing homes are going to have to segregate. Retirement communities are not mixing it up. Because when you look at these hospitalization numbers, there are 131 fatalities for every 100,000 cases of people who are 65 years and older. If you are hospitalized with COVID and hypertension, 57% of you are going to die. If you're hospitalized and you're obese with COVID, half of you are going to die. And so people are going to do in these target groups, if you're African American and you are hospitalized, 23%, much, much higher for African Americans, much, much higher. So we've just got to be very, very careful. Let's note that the President of the United States has tweeted. Concast, which is his planned words for Comcast, which owns MSNBC. Concast should open up a long overdue Florida cold case against Psycho Joe Scarborough. I know him and Crazy Mika well, used them beautifully in the last election, dumped them nicely, and will state on the record that he is nuts. Besides, bad rating. Hashtag open Joe cold case. Well, I don't know what that means, but I know that probably indicates the president turned on Joe, and Joe is on one of his rants about the president. And that I don't watch Joe and Mika anymore. I used to have them on in the background. I just don't need the craziness. We're in the middle of a national nightmare, and the president's tweet you can absorb and read, but listening to people go off on tangents unrelated to a national nightmare. When I'm trying to talk to doctors like my doctor, the kidney specialist, 1-800-520-1234. That's all I want to talk to are doctors. It's Nurse Week, by the way. My hat is off to the America's nurses. My mom was a nurse. There are two kinds of nurse. They're all angels. But one kind of nurse is to get the hell out of bed and start moving, nurse. And the other one is hold your hand and put a wet towel on your forehead. My mom was the former. All right? You know, the iron nurse. I'm not going to say Nurse Ratchet because she loved people, but she was get the hell out of bed nurse. Put a little dirt on it. Don't bother me. Is it broken? If it's broken, we might put a Band-Aid on it. That was her kind of nursing, but she did it. She was a great nurse. So to every nurse out there going to work this morning, God bless you. Now let me talk to you about Angel Tree. Every May, for years and years and years, I've raised money to send the children of people who are incarcerated to prison through Angel Tree, Prison Fellowship, every year. And thousands of you have stepped up to say, I'll send a kid to camp. Well, they can't go to camp this summer. So Prison Fellowship is doing something different. A very special new project, Angel Tree Care Packages. Kids with a mom or dad in prison have been very carefully selected for this. Jim Forbes of Prison Fellowship explains.
Kids all over the country, all 50 states, who their parent, while in prison, said, I really want to help the relationship, my son or daughter, and I'd like to give them a gift. So the kid receives the gift, and it doesn't say from Prison Fellowship. It says from mom or dad.
For $200, we will send these children who are not going to camp this summer. They're going to stay in that apartment. They're going to stay in those grim circumstances. They're going to $150 in grocery gift cards. They're going to get sports equipment of their choice, hoops, basketball, running shoes. They're going to get a children's Bible, a Zondervan Pathlight Camper's Bible, or a similar children's Bible. Will you help us? Over at HughHewitt.com, you'll see Angel Tree banner at the top. Angel Tree Care Packages. This summer especially. Help out, because there ain't going to be camp for these kids. We got to help them some way. Please be generous. You can help more than one kid. $200 a kid, Fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I are in for 5 kids. Please join us. HughHewitt.com. 33 minutes after the hour, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. Been looking forward to this. Steve Kornacki joins me. I think anyone who listens to the show knows I think Steve is one of the smartest guys in broadcast. Good morning, Steve. How are you? Hey, Steve, are you there? Nope, we lost him. Okay, call him back. And when you get a hold of him, I'll ask the question I had ready for him because it's 68,286 dead, according to some counts. The CDC says 65,000. Steve Kornacki, good to have you back. Steve, I was just saying, I think you're one of the smartest guys, so I would like you to tell me not what you see in the polling data, but what you see in the CDC's data. How do you describe this virus to someone who just beamed aboard from the Starship Enterprise?
It spread really quickly. It is heavily concentrated in the New York metro area and a few other metro areas. It has the potential, it seems, to spread to a lot of other places. But right now, after, I'd say 6 weeks of pretty intense social distancing, really 2 months of pretty intense social distancing, it looks like that cliche we kept hearing about flattening the curve. That seems to be, when I look at the individual state data, in a lot of places, that seems to be what we're seeing. So it has horrible potential. It's done horrible things, but maybe about 2 months in here, we've gotten to a place where, we were talking about getting 2 months ago.
Now, Steve Kornacki, if data was food, you would be a super chef. You would be on the cooking channel with your own restaurant, cooking up the data. When you look at the data about the disease, how do you describe the disease and the people it attacks?
Yeah, and I think I heard you talking about this a few minutes ago. It looks like it can, right, from everything I can see the data, it can affect anybody, but it looks disproportionately. The older you get, and the more you have, I think you were talking about, you say, if you have obesity, other sort of comorbidities, it looks like any kind of, if your breathing is compromised in any way, it looks like statistically, it just looks like you have a lot more to worry about if you get this. Anybody who gets it, I mean, I'm 40 years old. If I got it, I'd be very nervous. But I could also recognize the numbers tell me I have a far better chance of getting through it and maybe getting through it without much issue than somebody 40 years older than me.
We had a renal specialist call in earlier, quote, when you get it, you're really rolling the dice. And I've been using the analogy of a gunshot wound. We have about 100,000 gunshot wounds a year. Nobody wants a gunshot wound, right? It may not kill you, but it's going to hurt. And 30,000 plus of those people die. It is really bad to be shot by a gun. And if you have obesity, hypertension, or any of the other underlying comorbidities like asthma, you really don't want to get this. But I think we need to start talking about is who is safe. We know kids are safe, right, Steve Kornacki?
Yeah, I did see there was it's funny, I reached out to somebody and I haven't heard back yet. I saw that study that came out, I think, of England saying that they didn't have any records yet of a kid giving it to a parent. And I've seen a few cases, and I say a few, I mean like two that I found, so it's more anecdotal, of children under 12. But basically, yeah, statistically, you don't see kids popping up with this at all. It really just, and as I understand it, as it's been explained to me by the experts, it's kind of the opposite of what you see with a lot of these viruses, where it can be pretty widespread with kids in other cases. But here, yeah, statistically, it's barely a blip. It's not even a blip, I'd say.
Because what I'm working towards is your opinion of the following. Ought we to open the country to under 40-year-olds? Ought we to say to them, you might get a flu-like virus, very low likelihood, but you can go back to the restaurants. But if you're over 50, stay home. And if you're over 70, really stay home. You think that's where we're headed?
I wonder. I feel right now, my sense of it is the news you got last week about remdesivir, the optimistic things, and I take it with a giant grain of salt, but the optimistic things that you've heard from the folks working on that vaccine in the human trial stage over in Oxford, I wonder if we have a few months here before we get to what you're saying, where maybe we can make some really quick and impressive strides on the treatment front and get this into a position where, I've heard Scott Gottlieb talk about this, where when the fall rolls around, we have 3, 4, 5 different treatments we can throw at this. And the whole picture we're just talking about in the last few minutes looks different because anybody who's 50, 60, 70, overweight, hypertension, whatever, who comes down with this, suddenly has more than a fighting chance because we've got some treatments.
That is the good news for the people who are most vulnerable. I'm looking though to try and get the economy going back.
Yeah.
To say to people, all right, we've crunched. This is really a Fauci or a Birx question. We've crunched the data, and we think your odds of getting really sick to the point of death or even in ICU are very, very low if you're under, say, 45. So go for it. Now that is not, by the way, they've lost a sailor on the TR. Most sailors are not old, and most sailors are not health compromised. So it's clearly not always the case. But you also die in car crashes. And if we can get an idea of who is safe as opposed to who is vulnerable, I think that people like you, data crunchers, have got to start telling us this. I mean, how much time are you spending, Steve, studying this data as opposed to, say, polling data?
Yeah, no, the polling data has been pretty flat lately. I've been looking more at this, and I've approached it as obviously I'm a layman. My background is not medical, is not epidemiological at all. But I have been studying up as much as I can, and I think the vast majority of people looking at this outside of the medical professionals, folks in the news business are kind of laymen like me, and I think we're asking the same questions you're asking. I think that the concern that I've heard, with what you just kind of proposed, I guess what I hear is the potential for not necessarily, you can separate somebody who's 80, 85 years old. You could say let's keep them sort of isolated here. But what if you're a 35-year-old and you go to the grocery store, you go to your office, whatever, you pick it up, you're asymptomatic, you don't know you have it, and you're visiting with your seemingly healthy 58-year-old parent, and turns out they can't handle it that well. Are you going to see a lot of that? And the other issue too that I'm interested in here, just in terms of the data, is the prevalence of this. And I think we're starting right now to have widespread antibody testing. I think that's the other issue too for getting back to normal. It sounds like if you can get to a point, New York City might be closer to this than anybody else. They've had estimates here that 20%, 25% of the population of New York City may already have antibodies to this. It's spread that quickly here. I think if you can get a handle on the antibody situation, you potentially be talking about, the issue there of, hey, if you've had this, if you've gone through it, if you have the antibodies, are you good to go? I think that's a question that might be coming up.
You're right. I had a great doctor on Friday say, I need incidence and prevalence data, and it's not anywhere. And his frustration was, I need to know where it is and how often it is and who's getting it so that I can study and give advice. That's what I'm looking for, is pattern recognition, so that we can take pattern recognition and craft public policy from it. And it seems to me that the extremes have won. Now, here's a difficult question. You understand sunk costs. The country has enormous sunk costs in the shutdown. Do you think those sunk costs could possibly paralyze our public health authorities from giving us clarity, and not consciously, not that they're hiding something, but there are enormous sunk costs here, and we know what the dangers of those are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wouldn't feel comfortable suggesting that, but I hear what you're saying, and I think I more broadly, I have been frustrated that it feels like a lot of the debate around this is either you're all for opening everything up, or you're all for keeping everything closed until we can get, a vaccine or treatment. And I think my sense is, and I'm looking for polling on this, I haven't seen it yet, but I'm looking for good polling on this that gets to the middle ground on that, because I suspect that's where a lot of people are. I suspect that's where a lot of people are going, just because of the ground and how to come up with some kind of means for themselves and for our society to survive until you can get to a place where you have a vaccine and we can just get this behind us.
When I look at those 45 days, Steve Kornacki, the 15 days to slow the spread originally, and then 30 days to slow the spread, 45 days total. We've got to get that specific. Do you see anyone talking that way yet?
Not yet. I haven't. I'm starting to see the numbers get assembled like you are. I think we're getting more out there every day. I think another one, the doctor you were mentioning there, is it's the prevalence of this. How many people have this asymptomatically? How many people have had this asymptomatically and just never knew it? And we're going to find out when we get really widespread testing of people who've never had symptoms. And then when you get that number too, how easy is it for them to transmit it? We've got all these folks going into grocery stores with gloves on now. Is that something we got to keep doing, or is that an overrated? I think we need some more data on that front too.
Well, last question, Steve. As I've only asked you about the disease because I know your ability with numbers, even if you're a layman. I'm curious, what percentage of time on air are you using crunching the COVID numbers versus crunching the polling data? Because I think your value is so much higher on the former because the latter is going to change so dramatically in the next 6 months.
I think that's it. I'd say right now I'm 2/3 on the coronavirus. 1/3. I mean, I've got that big board where I do election results. We're tracking cases, we're tracking curves, we're tracking death rates. We're not tracking poll numbers as much in there anymore.
Are they doing that on a regular? When can I find Kornacki on NBC or MSNBC? Where's the regular Kornacki on COVID? Because I actually think I'd watch that every day.
It's honestly, you got to have it on all day because it might be in the 1 o'clock, it might be in the 3 o'clock. I'll pop up here and there depending on the day and depending on the topic. I can tell you that the next 2 nights, Monday, Tuesday, I'm going to be hosting the 7 p.m. hour, so you can.
I will, but
get a little bit there.
Go see Andy Lack and tell him Hewitt wants Kornacki on COVID on a YouTube channel. All right?
I'm going to pass that along.
Kornacki on COVID on a YouTube channel. I'll watch it every day. I trust you with the data. Steve Kornacki, always a pleasure. Follow him at Steve Kornacki. The data is driving me crazy, but finally CDC is catching up. And I hope everyone out there understands what I'm saying. I'm not mad at CDC. I think these 45 days have given us the opportunity to build hospital capacity, ICU capacity, to get our arms around vaccines, therapeutics, the Gilead, hydroxychloroquine when it works, when it's a last stand, all that stuff. Mostly, though, I think we're getting to where we can declare ollie in free for certain age groups. All right, that's all. But we need more data. And we need to actually start displaying the data. I would like to know, for example, how many runners get this thing and die? How many runners get this thing and don't even show it? Because is lung capacity and resting pulse and oxygen. I've been using my circle ring. I'll tell you about that next segment. It just works like a charm. But you know what else works is relieffactor.com. Now, I'm debating whether to take a day off because I did 10 on Saturday trundling and 9 on Sunday walking. And for a 51-mile week, first time I've done that, I credit relieffactor.com. I carry curcumin, resveratrol, and omega. First time I've done that since my misstep and bad back injury in 2006 in the Los Angeles Marathon. So first time I've done a 50-mile week in 14 years. And I credit relieffactor.com. And I also credit the fact I got nothing to do except walk alone or work. And eventually, or read, or watch bad television, the Viking stuff, The Last Kingdom. Relieffactor.com will support the temporary relief of minor aches and pains. You ought to use it every day. And you ought to be ordering your honorboundcoffee.com, honorboundcoffee.com as well. Stay tuned. I'll be right back, America, on the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. Per my conversation with Steve Kornacki, I wonder what you think about this. 1-800-520-1234. Government has to start telling people who is almost certainly not at serious risk of hospitalization so they can resume normal life. Could there be an all clear for those under, say, 45 who are not suffering, who are not obese or suffering from hypertension? Can we do that? The data set is now enormous. We need people to chop the data. I would love to know, as I said before, I am not ever going to the Olympics, all right? But I am in pretty doggone good shape except for a torn rotator cuff and a bad disc. That's it. Otherwise, God has blessed me. And by the way, I've got to get a piece or so of me cut off every 6 months because of an Irish Catholic sunburn and being a lifeguard. But other than that, I've been blessed. So the question becomes, okay, can I really go out? I mean, I've got a great cardiovascular system. I can go and go and go. I'm the Energizer Bunny. I'm not very fast, but I can go and go and go. What about Olympic athletes? Seriously, what about track athletes and young athletes? Can they not play? Can they not run this risk? Are we over? Do we have sunk costs? Now, the sunk costs are the money that you waste that you hate to admit. That's the best way I can explain it. Someone invests $100,000 in a startup company, and that startup company goes nowhere, zero, isn't working. And along comes the inventor or the starter of the company and say, give me another 100,000. Well, you think to yourself, well, I already put 100,000 in. Maybe I should put it. That's no. That 100,000 is sunk costs. That money is gone. You don't double down. So now we have a lot of sunk costs from the public health world telling everyone to stay home. And maybe we didn't have to do that because of what we know. Maybe we needed to really focus that on 65-year-olds who've got hypertension or asthma or kidney disease, and younger people who are morbidly obese. And by obese, I mean really obese, not packing an extra 20 or 30 and you need to get on the cookie diet or whatever it is. No, I'm talking about people with low. That's why I'm wearing Circle Ring. I don't have an ad scheduled here for them, but Body Metrics, BODImetrics.com. I've been using this for 3 weeks. I want to know my oxygen levels, SpO2. I want to know it when I sleep. I want to know it when I'm awake. And I got great oxygen levels, but you know what? Deviation from the mean of your oxygen level is a signal. This is not a diagnostic. This is an observational tool. And it's a very good one. That's what you wear when you go to the doctor. But this Body Metrics have figured out. By the way, it costs $300. You can get 10% off. Use my name, Hugh. But it's not cheap. But it is wonderful. It is not cheap, but it is data. It is not cheap, but it will tell you if you've got asymptomatic problems with your oxygen supply. It's not necessarily COVID. Brian in Pittsburgh, what do you think, Brian? Are you a doctor?
Yeah, hi, Hugh. I'm absolutely taking this disease, this virus seriously. I wear my mask. I'm concerned for my mom, my mother-in-law, my wife, so on and so forth. But Hugh, I think just to stipulate, because you're good with details, it's most people do well with this. Now, no one wants it. But most people recover.
That's correct. Oh, my goodness. 99,960 people recover out of 100,000.
Right. It's mild for most people. So it's those with the comorbidities. God bless them. I'm saying prayers for them. They are the ones.
Brian, here's the analogy. Do you own a gun?
No.
Okay, well, here's the analogy. There are millions of guns all over America. Most of those do not inflict any wound ever in the entire life of their livelihood. The virus is like a gun. It doesn't necessarily do anything to most people, but you don't want to get shot.
Absolutely. But Hugh, there's also the and I know you know this, people have this and don't know they have it. That's in the millions and millions.
Yes, asymptomatic.
They're finding out that those folk are actually passing on to other folk, even with comorbidities, immunity. That's amazing. Yep. Their system is passing on immunity.
No, Brian, that's not true. That's not true. They are passing on the virus. And some people will develop immunity and some people will die. Asymptomatic people are not passing on mild cases. That's incorrect. Asymptomatic people are passing on the virus, and it might kill the people they pass it on to.
Check that, buddy. Check that. I'm reading up.
No, 100%, 100%. I read the data every morning. I like your call, but I got to make sure people do not understand. If you have a mild case, you do not give a mild case. You give the virus, and if you give the virus to someone who's vulnerable, you're going to kill them. That's why you don't go see grandma and grandpa in the nursing home. I can't emphasize that enough. If you've got it and you give it to someone who's got comorbidity, you're killing them. That's why you stay away from grandma and grandpa. Don't go anywhere, America. Hour number 3 straight ahead.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you by Prison Fellowship's Angel Tree Summer Camps. Click on the banner at hughhewitt.com.
rest of the world, because the last people they want.
Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Greetings, everyone. It's May 4th in the year of the plague 2020. 68,286 Americans have died of COVID. 1,122,000 cases. Of the 100,000, for every 100,000 cases of the virus, 40 people end up in the hospital. But if you're over 65, 131 of you end up in the hospital. Comorbidity. If you've got hypertension and you end up in the hospital, it's 57%. You're going to die. 50% of the people who are obese and end up in the hospital with it die. So don't get it. As the doctor said last hour, when you get it, you're really rolling the dice. I'm joined now by Robert Costa of the Washington Post, host of Washington Week in Review. And Robert, I have been doing this. I've been in broadcast for 32 years. I have never seen a problem set like this because the data is so hard. I was talking with Kornacki about this last hour. What are your sources telling you about who is the most vulnerable, who is invulnerable to this, if anyone?
Well, everybody's vulnerable to it, and the data shows that obviously if you have comorbidities, if you have lingering health issues, you have a big problem. And the issue now is there's no vaccine, and there's treatment, but it's not exactly sure exactly how this treatment is going to be effective or not. Hydroxychloroquine, for example, FDA has sent a warning about it after a lot of hope about that drug. And so we're starting the summer, and there's still a real possibility of spread.
But what I see, Robert, when I look at the CDC's data, is that it is uniquely segregated by category into, it's like a gunshot wound. There are lots of guns around, a lot of bullets are fired in the United States every year, and the virus has been, millions of people have had it. It's killed 68,000 people. And what the government needs to start focusing on are those people who are relatively to almost certainly safe, even if they get it. Have you got any reporting on whether or not they're going to start saying all clear for example, people who are under 40 and in good health, athletes, you can go back and play. Are we close to that yet?
It's not based on any scientific evidence at this point that's confirmable. Are you seeing governors say, look, we're going to separate old people, let's say people who are over 70, who have comorbidities, they're just going to stay home. They are under a different regulation. But you do hear discussions about that at this point. But there's a lot of constitutional issues. You would know better than anyone, legal issues about how do you separate a population? How do you really regulate people staying home or not? Difficult issues to actually enact. But those discussions are underway because people are desperate in all of these states to reopen their economy.
Yeah, I don't think it's a legislative guidance I'm looking here. I'm looking for Tony Fauci to say something like, look, if you're under 45 and you're healthy, you're in good shape, you exercise regularly, you can take the kids with other so located parents, and some will get the virus, but they won't be impacted. I think, Bob, I think that the number of fatalities among children is in the double digits, low double digits. Is that what your reading of the data is?
I have not looked closely at the data, but it's definitely affecting older people more.
Yeah, and so I think they've got to start opening it up by telling, as opposed to negative messaging, positive messaging. And I think they're afraid to because of the sunk costs. As you know, everybody has invested a lot of money in the shutdown. They've lost, and by invested, I mean productivity has been crippled. We can't keep doing this. Do you hear that again and again?
I mean, my congressional sources are alarmed because they've already pumped trillions into the economy, and that liquidity has helped the stock market stay afloat. But if the economy starts to tank this summer and you have jobless numbers that are 30 million, 40 million, you're going to be in a position where Congress is just not going to have the money to come together and do another huge jolt for the economy. And that has everybody worried because the stock market being above 20, people feel okay. But if that stock market starts dipping back to 19, 16, 17, amid a death rate that's not really abating, you're going to have panic.
Well, the death rate is, I think we've got a fix on the death rate now, and it's going down as a percentage. But what I think we have to attack is the fear. There was a great question last night. When can we fly again? And to me, that is the $64,000 question. When will people feel free to fly? And it's when they start to tell people who is relatively, almost certainly, not going to die from the virus and not even going to end up hospitalized. That's when we're going to start to fly again. When you tell, I think it's the 45 and under healthy crowd, go on the plane, just don't go see grandma and grandpa. I think that's where we're headed, Bob Costa.
It seems to be where we're headed, and I have a couple sources in Florida. They're talking, should they try to urge DeWine in Ohio and DeSantis in Florida to keep different populations segmented, but I don't have sourcing on exactly how the governors themselves think of that suggestion. But you do see that under discussion among top Republicans in my sourcing world. It's a difficult proposition, though, because if you look at DeWine, for example, in Ohio, he's starting to pull back now this idea of reopening the state very quickly. You know Ohio better than anyone. He wanted May 1st. Now it's May 20th. He's looking further down the line just because the data in his state is worrisome.
It's because they've got prison population data, which is terrible in Ohio. I do know a little bit about that, and I've talked to doctors from Ohio. I'm studying my home state very closely. But I do think where we're going to end up is giving all the in freeze for demographics. Tell me where we're going to end up on the Hill, because on the House side, they want money for states and local. On the Senate side, they want liability guarantees, maybe federalization of tort law. They want some industry help. Is there a deal going to be done, Robert Costa?
Based on my reporting, it doesn't seem like a deal is in the works at this point. I mean, the liability is the biggest issue for the chambers of the world across the country. They want businesses to be protected. But if you're a Democrat supported by unions who believes in litigation for workers to be able to sue, customers to be able to sue, you're not going to come to an agreement to protect businesses. I don't see how these two sides come together at this point because they're so entrenched in their different camps.
You know, Robert, what's going to be interesting about the unions, the plaintiff lawyers will never give up, and they're important to the Democrats, right? The Trial Lawyers Association. But the unions they're not going to be unions left. They're going to be gone unless people go back to work, because people aren't going to be paying union dues. So they're going to have to cave on the liability, because Mitch is not going to, McConnell's not going to do this unless they protect the country from vulture plaintiffs bar. I mean, it is a bright line for McConnell, isn't it?
Oh, it's a very bright line for McConnell. He just doesn't see. He's hearing from too many CEOs, too many business groups that if they don't do liability protection, businesses would rather shutter than take the risk of being sued for $1 million.
Can you expand on that? Because I want people to understand the real debate in D.C. right now is over what the plaintiffs' bar wants, which is to feast on the ruins of American business like vultures, and what McConnell says is we're going to protect business or they're not reopening. Because that is, it's sort of like Fredericksburg in the Civil War. It's going to be the bloody angle.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't characterize it myself that way, because you also have a lot of employees and their advocates saying, if we're going to be told to go back to work or we won't get unemployment benefits, if we're being told to stand 1 foot apart, serving food, we're not given the right personal protective equipment, and we somehow contract coronavirus from coughing colleagues or employees, we don't want to be in a position where the business is protected. And so finding out the gray area of how this legislation is put together is going to be the real key for any deal, because you're going to have maybe liability protection to a point, but what kind of protections will workers get? That's going to be where McConnell and Pelosi have to come together. What is the line on liability?
Well, you know, it's interesting. That's just workers' comp. I just don't understand how that is a problem. But I do believe the plaintiffs' bar has got a parable of a gun. What do we call that? The moral equivalent of a gun to the head of the Democratic Party. Robert Costa, always a pleasure. Costa Reports on Twitter. Follow him on Washington Week in Review. Let me remind you, we are not this year doing our regular campaign for Angel Tree camps for children who have a mom or dad in prison. We can't do it because there aren't going to be camps this summer. Some camps may open up, but not the Angel Tree camp. What Angel Tree is going to do, they've gone to moms and dads in prison, and they found thousands of them who would like to send sports equipment and food to their kids. And so Angel Tree is going to do very special Angel Tree care packages. Jim Forbes from Prison Fellowship explained.
Kids all over the country, all 50 states, who their parent, while in prison, said, you know, I really want to help the relationship, my son or daughter, and I'd like to give them a gift. So the kid receives the gift, and it doesn't say from Prison Fellowship. It says from mom or dad.
So if you will help us do this, $200 gets one of these packages with $150 in grocery gift cards, all right, grocery gift cards. And they can't go out and spend it on candy. And soccer ball, basketball, sports equipment, running shoes. I think Prison Fellowship is doing the best they can to help these kids like they do every summer. Please help us by going to HughHewitt.com. Find the Angel Tree banner, Angel Tree Care Packages banner at the top. $200 saves a kid's summer. Please help us. I'm Hugh Hewitt. I'll be right back.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by patternsofevidence.com.
Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt here. Tough weekend. Lost my oldest friend this weekend, Johnny Phillips. Known him since I was 2 or 3 years old on Arthur Street in Warren, Ohio. Passed away in St. Pete's Beach, and he will be missed. Clarence is from Warren, Ohio, calling in this morning. Clarence, you made me think of Johnny again after I spent all weekend celebrating his life with our friends. What's up with you? Where are you in Warren?
Where am I in Warren? I'm between the Trumbull Hospital and Sunrise Inn.
Oh, well, you're in a great place. Stop by, get some pizza. So, what's on your mind? What do you do in Warren, by the way?
What do you mean?
Do you work for Ganarian Company Wholesale? I mean, what do you do?
Oh, I work in Niles. There's a where the old Republic Steel used to be.
Oh, you
There's
betcha.
an aluminum extrusion plant there now.
Yep, I know it well. So, you don't have to be ashamed of working in Niles. We all know that Niles is the younger brother of Warren, and at least it's not Howland, right? I mean, you could be worse. You could be working in Howland. Go ahead, Clarence. What's on your mind?
Well, I was just saying the word you were using earlier without using was herd immunity, and that's where we need to be. And I find it a little bit ironic that the places where that were hit the worst, like New York City, they're the closest to where they need to be.
Yeah, I'm rejecting that, Clarence. I don't think it's a herd immunity deal. I don't think that's what we need. I think it's too lethal. That's like herd immunity from gunshots. It's too lethal for the people that it kills to suggest that herd immunity, it just kills too many people.
You were talking about the young people and the healthy people going back to work, and what happens then is all those people get it, and then they get over it, and then they can't spread it anymore.
Well, that is gonna eventually happen. Okay, but by herd immunity, I am not suggesting everybody go out and get the disease and pass it around like measles. Not a good idea, because it's too much of a killer for people who are vulnerable. Clarence, good to hear from you. I appreciate that. I got to do a market check brought to you by AndrewandTodd.com. Andrew Del Rey, Todd Avakian are with Sierra Pacific Mortgage, and they are busy. How are they busy? They are working all the time. Why? Because the 10-year treasury is at 0.64. And a lot of Americans need money out of their house, and a lot of Americans are doing the other thing, which is, hey, it's a great time to buy a house. And they're moving up because they all of a sudden have more. They haven't lost their job. They're able to work from home. They're just protected for whatever reason. The economy. They're not working for an airline. They're not working for a cruise ship. They're working for Amazon, perhaps, and they're buying a house. And they're buying it with Sierra Pacific Mortgage and with AndrewandTodd.com. 888-888-1172. Get in line. It takes a while. Demand is high. You can lower your monthly cost dramatically, but you got to get started. Get started at AndrewandTodd.com. There is not going to be at least a huge rally in the morning today because the United States markets make up their own mind by the end of the day. I see some good signs it might be a good day, but not overseas. Japan was down almost 3%. Hong Kong was down more than 4%. Germany was down 3.33%. So that means could be a rough start to the day, but we don't know how it's going to end. I just know it's going to end great for people who want to borrow money from their house, take cash out, or people who want to buy a house, or people who want to buy a second property, or invest in a rental. This is the time to do it. Andrew and Todd are the people to do it with. AndrewandTodd.com. Maury in Ohio, very quickly. Maury, what's on your mind? Pam in Delaware. What's up, Pam?
Hey, Hugh. Just wanted to call in and let you know what I was seeing in the intensive care unit.
Oh, then hang on. Don't go anywhere, Pam. You're one of the people I want to talk to. Don't go anywhere. If you're on a cell and you drop, call right back. Hang on, Pam from Delaware. Something good comes out of Delaware. Don't go anywhere, America. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Don't forget to sign up for the Hughiverse. All of Hugh's broadcasts on demand, the after show, which in my opinion is worth the price all by itself, Dwayne FM, and all sorts of bonus content. www.hughiverse.com.
33 minutes after the hour, America, giving us some answers. Pam in Delaware. You're a doctor, Pam?
Yes.
What kind of specialist?
Psychiatrist.
Okay, so that's, you're socially distancing, obviously, but what do you see? What are you doing? And how have you come in contact with the COVID patient population?
On the consult liaison service, we go into the room and examine the patient.
And so what are you seeing?
So we're seeing neurologic, neuropsychiatric, and neuroimmunologic kind of reactions, changes in personality, encephalopathy, which is another word for delirium, psychosis, myasthenia gravis, like symptoms, multiple sclerosis, demyelinating symptoms. Those are the majority of the psychiatric consultations for symptomatology that we're seeing.
Doc, are you spending time with the data sets that are being, filled out now by the CDC? I study them, Steve Kornacki, other laymen study them, and we try and tease lessons out. What are the lessons you're getting about this disease? Obviously, a kidney specialist called in earlier. I want to quote him. When you get it, you're really rolling the dice. And he agreed with my analogy. It's like a gunshot wound if you're among the vulnerable populations. It's very serious. But what does the data tell you about how much of a threat it is to the average Joe who's under 50?
Well, the problem is asymptomatic carriers. So if you open up the society for people who are lower risk, it's a low frequency, high risk for those people, which you're still gambling to a degree, but because they could all be asymptomatic carriers, you have to treat them as if they all are, because otherwise they're going to kill their nana.
Well, if we put that message out, Doc, low frequency, high risk, you're very unlikely to be hospitalized if you're under 45 and healthy. You're almost certainly not going to be hospitalized if you're under 25 and healthy, and you're not going to be hospitalized if you're a kid. Can we put that message out and combine it with, and you can't see grandma and grandpa, and you can't go near old people? Isn't that where we end up?
To a degree, but you also have to assume the transmission is there. Not just staying away, but everything you touch. And otherwise, it's going to start rolling again.
Oh, so that's an interesting. So asymptomatic people can spread it by touch, where older people might come.
Right.
Okay, so talk to me about what we have to do for the economy to get up is to get airplanes flying again. If the airplanes are rigorously cleaned, and if they are flights limited to people who are, say, 50 and younger, will that work?
I think so.
So you're being very aware of all the risks, and you're saying, I think the public health officials have to start telling not who's at risk, but who isn't at risk of dying from it, even though they have to warn them. What you just told me doubles down on the messaging. If you're vulnerable, hypertension, obese, and over 65, you've just got to stay home.
Right, but even because the outcome for people who do get it in the less risky groups is so horrible. We've been seeing 50-year-old men without any known risk factors throwing clots all over their body and dying within a matter of hours.
I have seen those.
So much we don't know.
That's why the anecdote, it's like a gunshot. That's why I've been telling people, if you get shot in the head, it's terrible, you'll be dead. If you get shot in the lung, you might die. If you get shot in the leg, you probably won't die, but it's still awful. These are bad cases, but the gunshot wounds don't paralyze America with fear because people can minimize it, right?
Right.
Can anyone effectively minimize? Are you still exercising outdoors, doctor? Are you a runner? Are you an outdoor athlete? Are you walking?
Yeah, I'm outdoors.
And so what are you doing when you run and you walk? Are you giving people 2 feet, 3 feet? What are you doing?
6
I know,
feet and a mask.
But it's not possible to give people 6 feet on a running path. I've learned that over the last 6 weeks. I do 50 miles last week. There just isn't 6 feet to be had. You have to sometimes come around people, right? That doesn't bother you, does it?
Well, I've got a mask on, and I pick locations that have wide paths so that the likelihood that I'm going to expose myself or someone else is less.
Well, so do I. So do I. But there are still, if you're using a running path as opposed to being on a street, and streets have their own risks, you're going to come close to bicyclists, especially. They drive me crazy, right? Bicyclists
That's
are.
true. The bicyclists.
Can we all agree on one thing, which is bicyclists have got to wake up and stop? Explain what you mean. What are we talking about here? Because they're shedding, right?
They could be, and the height at which they pass you is perfectly arranged that if everything went wrong, they could transmit.
And they don't appear to be, at least half of them are not wearing masks, and half of them are being their typical reckless selves on a small bike path with kids anyway. It just makes me crazy how they conduct themselves. So, I'm going to get every biker in America mad at me now, Doc, and you are anonymous.
Well, they're going to have to stand in line behind me.
Yeah, well, the scooters are the same way. They're just so reckless. They're so indifferent to people. People who run without face masks, I say the same thing. Okay, doctor, have you seen many really healthy young people with this disease? You said 50-year-old men. I want to get to the 40 and unders. Have you seen any 40 and under with the disease?
No.
Neither have I. I'm 1 degree removed from an older person who died, a couple of degrees removed from people who've been sick, but I haven't heard of one 40-year-old and under who've had a bad case. I mean, they've had flu or flu-like illnesses. I just think we're going to have to tell them to go back to work and to start traveling. I'll give you the last word, Doc.
Yeah, I think if you add the extra caution that just because we're saying you can now do A, B, and C doesn't mean you can forget about all the precautions.
I agree.
That's important messaging.
By the way, what is the recovery rate for these people with the psychoses and the delirium and the associated neurological disabilities? Are they recovering completely, or are they recovering as in 1918? A lot of people had long-lasting psychoses.
There's too little data right now. I mean, anecdotally, I've seen both, but probably they were dying from other manifestations of the illness, not from the psychosis.
All right, Doc, I appreciate it very much. This is what I need. The anecdotes are so scary, America. It's the anecdotal evidence that'll scare you to death. It's statistical evidence that'll make you reckless. So the middle ground is to understand, as the first doctor today said, when you get it, you're rolling the dice. And when you're rolling the dice and you already have the odds against you, it's a hell of a risk. Now, I want to go back and drive home what Donald Trump said last night that was the most important thing that he said. They ought to add this to the back of the Lincoln Memorial. Cut number 17.
What they really treated the world badly on, they stopped people going into China, but they didn't stop people going into the USA and all over the world. So you could fly out of Wuhan, where the primary problem was, all of the problem, essentially, also where the lab is. But you could fly out of Wuhan and you could go to different parts of the world, but you couldn't go to Beijing and you couldn't go to any place in China. So what's that all about? In other words, they knew they had a problem. I think they were embarrassed by the problem, very embarrassed. And, the case could be made. They said, hey, look, this is going to have a huge impact on China, and we might as well let the rest of the world, because the last people they want...
We might as well let the rest of the... I listen to the president very closely, and he often ends his sentence. The thought is done, he ends his sentence. It's a New Yorker pattern. And the rest of the world can suffer with us, because otherwise it'll be a competitive disadvantage. That's heartless. The president just accused the communists of being, well, communists. Mao's Great Leap Forward that killed millions. Stalin's starving of the Ukraine. Indifference to human suffering, indifference to human life, that's the communist way. And the president just said it. Play it again, would you? Cut number 17.
What they really treated the world badly on, they stopped people going into China, but they didn't stop people going into the USA and all over the world. So you could fly out of Wuhan, where the primary problem was, all of the problem, essentially, also where the lab is. but you could fly out of Wuhan and you could go to different parts of the world, but you couldn't go to Beijing and you couldn't go to any place in China. So what's that all about? In other words, they knew they had a problem. I think they were embarrassed by the problem, very embarrassed. And, the case could be made. They said, hey, look, this is going to have a huge impact on China, and we might as well let the rest of the world, because...
Stop. That's what I want on my board. Because he didn't say it. He didn't finish the sentence. But I can finish the sentence, and you can finish the sentence, and it's the Communist Chinese Party, the Chinese Communist Party said, let the rest of the world suffer. We can't afford to be the only country in the world with this virus. Gosh, it's cold-blooded. It's so astonishing to the Western mind, to the Judeo-Christian way of thinking, to the Islamic way of thinking. It is so it's a communist way of thinking. We survive, they die. We can't let them get ahead. Wow. Over at the Washington Post, I have got a column on the new frigate. The good news of last week is the Navy accelerated and selected their brand new frigate. And it's going to be made in Wisconsin. It's going to be a great ship. The head of, by the way, the trolls are out again, right? I've got, 800 comments now? 850 comments. It's been up for 2 hours, basically. People have been seeing it for 2 hours. They put it up last night. No one saw it. But in the 2 hours that people are seeing 800 comments, the nuts, saying, look, you let a contract for 10 of these. The whisper number is 73. Whisper number meaning we really need 73 of these in the fleet. Well, Mr. President, issue an order to the Navy to say, hey, open up the purse. We'll go get the money. We're building all 60 to 73 of them. I need 2 more shipyards. Put one in Ashtabula, put one in Erie, put one in Detroit. Yeah, wherever you want to put them. I don't know anything about where to build ships, but I know from Freedom's Force, you can build a shipyard in 6 months. You can, if you want to do it. You can build them on the Great Lakes. Go get them going. These are the frigates that are missile porcupine. And they go to the first island chain and they say to the People's Republic of China, you cannot screw with us because you can't take out this many missile ships. You can't. It's the vital element along with aircraft carriers of the next century. All right, relieffactor.com. Look, I'm not bragging when I tell you how much I'm walking and running. I am bragging, but I'm not bragging. I'm just telling you. A 50-mile week for the first time since 2006. Why? Because I got time. Why? Because I'm back in decent shape. Why? Because my back isn't killing me. Yeah, it is, but I'm getting through it and I'm recovering faster. Support for the temporary relief of minor aches and pains from relieffactor.com. The only natural supplement I take is really 4 pills. I carry curcumin, resveratrol, omega. Take it every morning. Feel better. Feel better. Go farther. Put your mask on. Stay away from people. You bicyclists. Just get off your bikes. Really, you people are driving me crazy. You are exactly as the doctor said. You're like a virus spreader. You're like a fertilizer of the virus. If you've got it and you're on a bike, really, you're like the Johnny Appleseed of the virus. So let's shame bicyclists who do not have masks. That's a good thing. I'll be right back, America. Stay tuned.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show brought to you by Sierra Pacific Mortgage. For more info, call 888-888-1172.
Welcome back, America. 51 minutes after the hour. I'm playing this because I want to know if my next guest, the redoubtable Tim Alberta of Politico, has ever heard this before. Tim, have you?
I can't say that I have.
That is the Smothers Brothers in one of the most famous routines of the 60s. And the reason I play it is because I get through the day by waiting for my chocolate at the end of the day. How are the Albertas coping at home?
You know, we're doing all right. I suppose as far as chocolate goes, we've got one of those big Sam's Club jars full of M&Ms that we dole out for good behavior from the kids, and
tried and true. Oh, you've got parenting down. That's all you need are M&Ms in a jar. There you've got it going. Tim, what is going to happen? What is going to happen on the Hill on Phase 4? I think they have to do a Phase 4, but there are some pretty bright lines drawn in the sand.
Yeah, well, so I agree that I think they'll have to do it as well, and I don't know that the bright lines in practice are as bright as they are in theory, Hugh. And what I mean by that, of course, is that you see this as relatively routine whenever the parties are sort of, drawing their lines in the sand, so to speak, at the outset of negotiations or at the outset of the, pre-negotiation period. And then, as they get to the table, like McConnell, Schumer, Pelosi, these folks have worked together long enough. I think ultimately, if and when there's a recognition all the way around that something has to get done, then those bright lines fade a little bit and they figure out a way to get something done. I just don't expect it to happen with the speed of these earlier phases. I think that you could be looking at something that gets drawn out by, several weeks, if not maybe a month or two.
Now, I personally think the House side or the Democratic side are going to insist on money to keep employees of the state and local unions going. And I believe that McConnell and team are going to insist on liability protection for businesses. Those are the must-haves. Everything else, I think, is negotiable, Tim Alberta. What do you think of my assessment of the must-haves?
No, I think that's right. And honestly, I don't think that they're mutually exclusive. In a situation like this, you ultimately have to allow both parties to deliver for constituencies, and ultimately you can have all the tough talk you want, but at the end of the day, in divided government particularly, you're not going to be able to deliver for your constituency unless you allow the other folks to deliver to their constituency. So that's what's going to happen. The shades of it are going to be determined, and the exact numbers and the contours of a deal could look different depending on the day of the week, but ultimately that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, the president said last night he must have a payroll tax. And, that's really not on Mitch's list, but it's on his, so it's a three-way negotiation. Let me play for you what I thought was the most important moment last night, Tim Alberta, in the Lincoln Memorial Town Hall. Cut number 17.
What they really treated the world badly on, they stopped people going into China, but they didn't stop people going into the USA and all over the world. So you could fly out of Wuhan, where the primary problem was, all of the problem, essentially, also where the lab is. But you could fly out of Wuhan and you could go to different parts of the world, but you couldn't go to Beijing and you couldn't go to any place in China. So what's that all about? In other words, they knew they had a problem. I think they were embarrassed by the problem, very embarrassed. And, the case could be made. They said, hey, look, this is going to have a huge impact on China, and we might as well let the rest of the world, because
the case can be made. What's he implying, Tim Alberta?
Well,
he's implying they knew what they were doing.
Oh, sure. Well, it doesn't sound like he's implying it. It sounds like he's flat out saying it, right?
Yeah, he didn't quite say they made a heartless decision to make the world suffer because they were going to suffer, but that they couldn't afford the competitive disadvantage. That's a hell of a thing to say.
Yeah, it is. as far as the rosy relationship with President Xi, that may now be a thing of the past. But look, and maybe that keeps him up at night, or maybe it keeps certain members of his administration up at night. I think by and large, it doesn't keep anybody in the Republican Party or anybody on Capitol Hill at large up at night. This is sort of a long time coming in a lot of ways. And look, all of the evidence suggests that they did know what they were doing, and that China was sort of intent on not only covering its track, but making sure that if they were going to be disadvantaged, then everyone else was as well. So good on the president for saying so.
That's it. It's going to be a China election because, Tim, my view, it's not yours, it's my view, is that the Democratic Party is weak on the CCP. They're appeasers. And Trump is tough. And the United States is going to have to choose. I think that's the election in a nutshell. We'll see. Tim Alberta on Twitter at Politico.com for the magazine. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Generalissimo. Wear a mask, Generalissimo, on your scooter. I'll be right back tomorrow, America, on the next Hugh Hewitt Show.